Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another show. Now, this is a co-hosted show series. There will be 3 of these shows, and excuse me, I'll stop for one moment. While Tony's voice gets into gear. Thankfully, we will be able to edit all of that out. Okay, take 2. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm your host, Tony Lontis, and today we'll be introducing a beautiful, amazing, phenomenal co-host, and we'll be hosting a series of 3 shows together. And the topic that we're going to be talking about is based in the mental health space. But before we get on and I tell you more about my beautiful co-host, here's what you need to know. If you're listening to this live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or Everyday Women's Network, please remember that the talking points and the links to how you can connect with our beautiful guest or myself appear below the show. If you miss any in this show series, please jump onto Everyday Women's Network and you will find the series there. It's a powerful topic, and I'm delighted to be able to share the show with the beautiful Karen Comba. Now, a reminder, Everyday Women's Network is available on Apple, Android, and Amazon Fire, and you can get these shows live on your phone, your iPad, your laptop, your desktop, and your smart TV across the globe. Now, each and every show begins with a special acknowledgement, and it goes like this. I want to acknowledge the people of the Yugambeh language region on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. And I want to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders listening and watching the show today. Now, Karen is a beautiful, gorgeous soul. And in this first show with Karen, we're going to talk about her journey and life to this point. In the second show, we're going to explore the wonderful book, her memoir, that talks about her mother's battle and her interaction with her mother along the journey of schizophrenia. And in the final show, I want to talk to Karen in depth about her work in child advocacy and mental health, because it is so important. Here's what you need to know about Karen. Her memoir is a rare and powerful, harrowing and intimate portrait of far-reaching generational impacts of severe mental illness. Her story is told with determination, searing honesty, and the book recounts the shattering details of growing up being the prime target of her schizophrenic mother's mental and physical abuse. Karen's now dedicated her life to mental health advocacy. She's managed nursing homes, medical offices, and worked directly with those affected by mental illness for many, many years. She was born in rural Nebraska, now lives in Castle Rock, Colorado with her husband, Curt, and she believes in staying in your happy pond, showing up every day and just doing that. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tony. It's a complete honor to be on Everyday Women's Network and on Tony TV. It's just a complete honor. And I'm so glad that you're helping me get the word out there and the awareness on such an important subject as mental health.
Yeah. Karen, as you know, mental health is part of my story and why I've been looking so much forward to talking to you in this space. I know that mental health is incredibly important to you, but we can't start that conversation without talking about your journey in that space. How old were you when you first realized that your mum had a mental health illness?
Well, Tony, the interesting thing with children is they don't know that there's even a word mental health illness, or they don't even
Correct.
that's the word, that you're even when you're growing up. And I was only a little child. So I started feeling what they start to feel, Tony, is a disconnect. What I did at the age of 4 was, you're about 3.5. You're supposed to, you come into this world and your nature is you love your parent, just like animals. You're born, you got a father, you got a mother, you have a guardian, whatever the nurturing people are around you, that's your love.
And we have to remind people as children, no matter what environment they arrive in, they are imprinted or imprint on the nurturers. And in your case, your mum.
Yes. And then what started to happen to me, Tony, was my brother was born and my grandmother had come over and I wanted to hold him. And I sensed it was almost like a fear because I was so little, but I saw the look my mother was giving me and it wasn't a normal look from her eyes. There was no word spoken, but just like it started the beginning of an incredible fear of disconnect. And the child, you start feeling disconnected, like, what did I do? And you're wanting that love. You're going, where did you go? How come, and you do
And you
not
didn't do anything, remember?
you
We
didn't
must
do anything.
remember.
Right. And you're
Karen didn't
just
do
not,
anything.
yeah, and you're not wrapping your mind, Tony, around it. You can't. And the thing is, no one's helping you. Everybody's still putting that I want to put Band-Aid on it. Let's not talk about it. It's happening in our family. Let's just be quiet about it. But what they don't realize is in the home, this is happening. And it's not, everybody is trying to deal with it. My father's trying, it's new to him. What do I do with my love of my life, my soulmate? Now she's starting to not be the woman I know and fell in love with. Who is this person? And this person starts to emerge and nobody knows who it is. And so the child begins the incredible amount. Mine was just complete fear and scared and questioning all the time. But I never would say it. That's another thing the child doesn't do. For some
No,
reason,
they don't.
that innocent, that child just takes it in, puts it inside their body, which is very hard on the body, but puts it inside, holds it in there, and starts to just survive.
Karen, you wouldn't have known this as a tiny 4-year-old, but retrospectively, had your mother battled with schizophrenia all of her life, or was it something that was triggered by pregnancy? Because all of those scenarios are accurate real life. What was it for you and your family?
Well, it was really quite odd because my mother was a very, they want to say genius category. She graduated from college at the age of 16, high school at 13. They couldn't hold her. So she could read medical books this thick. And you would ask her 3 days later, I can do this in retrospect because I knew now that
Yes,
I'm
you've
older and
done,
everything.
yes.
I've done my research on everything. She could relate and tell you exactly what was on that page. So what was happening, and she graduated and started teaching school, kindergarten through 8th grade, one-room school for years.
Uh-huh.
And I remember my grandmother saying that, she'd stay up late at night, grading the papers and everything. So when I'm saying when this started happening when I was 3.5, it was also new to my mother. And
Oh,
nobody diagnosed her just because of having my brother. Nobody ever brought that up. She just started to disconnect from me and disconnect from life. And when I say that, I mean, they start going into I have the honor of saying crazy. People say, please don't say that. I said, yes, a child can say that. When
a
you've
child
lived,
can.
a child can say that. My mom started getting very crazy and would scream at me and tell me, I had to play on certain sides of the house because people were shooting at the house. I was wearing the wrong colors. I'd come home and you're just all of a sudden you're being, so I'm going to go up a little further than 4.
Yes,
And you
yes.
getting called dumb and you're stupid and nobody want, why are you on this earth? And then not at the siblings were little, and you get them on that. And so I would find myself standing there staring at the side of the house because you believe your mother. You did not
Yes.
question. You do not question whatever that comes out of your parents' mouth. Is sacred to you, is God to you, it's
Mm.
life to you. It's just like teaching a kid how to go 1, 2, 3, the ABCs, the same thing. So when your parent is looking at you and screaming that there's people shooting, you believe it. So I found myself staring at the side of the house looking for bullet holes and actually
Oh,
thinking that the marks on the house, just from now, age of a house, was actually the bullets. She would get crazy on the phone. They had party lines then. She would
yes.
she would talk to what I didn't know then was made up creatures, made up people, made up
Oh,
scenarios. But the main thing is she went after me, and I'm not really sure why that was. I was the oldest of 3.
yes.
They have a tendency to do that. She also went after my father quite a bit mentally, verbally.
I
But
was, that was
mine
my
started,
next question was around your dad.
yeah, my dad and myself. The beating started, the poking and
Oh,
the severe, and I know now she didn't know she was living with this, but at the time, I don't even know who this person is and why is the hugs quit. That's another thing that starts to happen. So the child, I'll tell you what starts to happen. The child, your instinct says you want to hug, I
yes,
love, you want to kiss, you
yes,
know, they're like little animals. You got to hold them, you nurture them. You want kids
yes.
are the same thing, nurture, nurture, nurture. So all that went away. So what starts to happen is the child still wants that love.
You
And it
start to
starts
get neglected.
well, you start gravitating to things that will give you that,
Mm,
not necessarily in the right form.
yeah, yeah.
So as you get into your teenage years now,
Oh, yeah.
you can give yourself up sexually. You can give yourself up to addictions.
Yes,
Um, you can start, and all you're wanting is someone to just hold you
connect
from
to. Hmm.
connect
Hmm.
to, um, tell you you're pretty, and you don't really.
Yes,
But when I found myself doing that, I never got the results. I would go in and I was realizing it still wasn't doing anything. So you just keep going and you keep thinking you're not worth it. So now another thing that starts happening as you get older,
yeah.
um, and you're in school. School was my salvation. But
Mm,
as you start to get older, Tony, then you start realizing you just don't feel like you do belong because you've been told every day how stupid and dumb you are and you're not worthy of anything and you're actually feel worthless. So that child is going to school and everybody goes, well, how are you going to find this child? I'll tell you how to give you one reason. Everybody looks at a child, they got D's and F's all the time. And they're saying, oh, they just can't make it. They're not A's, B's, C's. I'm telling these teachers now that I speak to, You look at that DNF student, because I'm going to tell you why I was DNF for a long time.
Yes.
Was because when I sat in that classroom, I couldn't hear the teacher. I couldn't read the book. I just watched the clock because I knew every minute, every time that bell rang, it was one more time closer for me
Instead
to
of
go
going
home.
home. Oh, Karen.
So you don't even absorb your school work.
Mm.
And when you get home, there's no homework because you're dealing with this rage of
Everything
everything.
mm,
And your normal is not anyone else's
else is
normal.
normal. And you
So
don't talk about it, do
you
you?
don't talk about it. You don't tell the teachers. Now, I will say, I love teachers' death. My mother was one, but
Mm.
I do tell them, I said, if I'm not going to tell you the truth, then you're not going to know what to look for. I don't know how teachers passed me, Tony, for all those years
Absolutely.
and did not know that I couldn't spell, hardly,
Oh,
I couldn't do math. I couldn't, so I don't know how in the world I got missed, but I
agreed.
just kept getting passed on. So I tell teachers nowadays, I said, watch out for that child. Don't pass them through. You've got to you
Get
got
to
to
the
figure
bottom
it
of
out.
what's going
You got to get,
on.
yes. And if they don't talk about it, get a family member or that other spouse, that guardian, they're wanting to come in. You know, when you go into the school now and say, well, Joey's having a little trouble because his mom just got diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, what's wrong with saying mental? Can't,
Yes.
because we all have a brain, and I don't know why the
Why
world
it's
feels,
any different to a
why is
physical
that any
illness.
different? Yes. Why
Absolutely.
can't we talk about the brain? It can get hurt. It
And
can
it
go
can be correct.
devastating, and it can be correct. I mean, nowadays they're getting better about it, but still not. They're still, I always find this quite amusing when they say, it's real easy to say mental health, we're working with mental. They say the word, but then doing the solution. There's the solution's a different kicker. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I'll stay with you on the story. Um, I found myself even in marriages as the story goes on. It didn't matter if my marriage, work, I never felt I was worthy. So
Yes.
you
There's
have
a
failure after failure after failure, but there's something that was
trying.
inside of me, Tony, that kept going, I know I'm not stupid. And there was like this fine that I tell the kids, you hang on to that because it's inside. You have a gift.
Mhm.
And but I'm out here telling you maybe we can fix some things so that you don't have to go through your whole life with this.
Yeah.
But right now, the child's feeling nervous in their stomach. If another thing, the teachers, and I'll stay on that for a little bit, they can look
Yeah.
for, because that seems to be a big one. I've gotten over
Yeah.
10,000 emails asking me what can I look for.
Mm.
And I say another thing is look out when there's sports. Is there parents there watching that child?
Wow.
Mine never went. Dad was a workaholic trying to pay the bills because insurance doesn't cover mental health. So he was a workaholic, he had incredible integrity, a beautiful man, but he was trying to deal the best way he can, pay the bills, 3 children, has a woman that he doesn't even know anymore, that's calling him inadequate every day. I'm being nice because we have television
Yes.
and everything, but
Yes.
the verbal was quite vicious. And so he's getting told that every day from a woman that was his soulmate. And then so he's dealing with that. He's got the children. So he doesn't go to the sports. The person that's ill doesn't even care that there's a
Just
sports.
yeah.
They're just wherever they're at in their mind. And if they're anxiety, bipolar, drinking, doing the drugs, to whatever they do to get over. My mother drank with her illness because she said the pain was too much in her mind. That's
Oh,
another thing to look
oh,
for. You think, okay, someone's an alcoholic. Is it really just that? I can promise you
never
probably
just that. It's
never just that. It started somewhere.
alcoholism is a symptom of fundamental trauma, mental. There's always something. Always,
And it
always,
always starts
always.
with the mental. And that's why I say it's not, I tell the teachers, it's not as hard as you think.
Mm.
if you think about it, if we can get to the 6th and 7th and 8th graders, they say, well, where were you starting to feel it really bad? Well,
Mm.
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, I
Yes,
started getting
yes.
really bad.
They're very important ages, aren't they,
Yes,
Karen?
you're trying to grow up.
Yeah,
You got a mother that thinks that it was horrendous. I mean, when I say that, I might as well just say it out loud. They can read the
absolutely.
book. There's things in the book that are so raw, but you're teenaging, going through all this. This is how I put it to the teacher. So you're supposed to love your parent.
Yes.
Can you
It's
imagine?
built into a
It's built
child to
love.
love their parents. So for people, for the audience listening, that's a fundamental component. So even though this parent is creating a horrendous life around this child, the child will still love the parent.
Was
It's
to always love the parent.
innately built into there. So there's
Yeah,
this quandary between I love my parent, but this is my reality. That sets
I hate
kids up for just horrible outcomes.
it's horrible because you find the child's getting ripped inside the heart.
Yeah,
Because those days I hated my mother. There's days I didn't like her. But I had this, I want to love you, but I can't. I had all this going on inside, wondering how come nobody was helping me.
yeah,
Where was
yes,
anybody at? I
yes,
would watch the relatives come. Now that I look back, that I tell them, you knew this was going on. You
yeah,
knew it, and you can't just sit back on this. And this child is like, they would drive in the yard, and my mother would be beating me to death with a stick, and then my aunt would say, "How come you weren't crying?" And I remember looking at her, and I was only about 8 years old. And I said,
yes. Why aren't
"I
you
don't,
doing
I don't
something?
hurt it. I don't hurt." And she goes, "What do you mean you don't hurt?" I said, "I have made myself not feel it." And I said, and she didn't, they should have heard. How can an 8-year-old, 9-year-old make their body not feel? They can do it, and you do it, and you make yourself go away. And I did that many times. That's another thing that child will do. They'll actually go
It's
away
a
in their mind somewhere else.
coping mechanism.
Yes.
I actually only recently have done some work in that whole disassociation process, the coping mechanism of the mind of a child. And
Yes.
the only way that you as a child, you're not an adult yet. You can't reason and think like an adult. So the tools that are innately built into a human being mean that as a child you disassociate, and that means going to a different place, pretending something's not happening. They're coping mechanisms for
Yes.
something bad happening in their
Yes.
lives.
I
Yeah,
would go hide in the attic. I would
yeah.
hide in the
Run
closet.
away? Did you run
At the door.
away?
I ran away. You do a lot of things. One time and you get really good at, I was finding out that little person inside me going, I don't like this. And I would lie to the bus driver. Lying is another thing to look for.
Yeah,
In their world, I would lie to the bus driver. I even lied to my little girlfriend saying, my mom said I could come over to your house. What they
yeah.
didn't know is I wanted to see her house.
Mm,
I was
mm.
little and I wanted to see, is your house like my house? And is your mom like my mom? And I just,
And
and I,
then there's the realization, Karen, the
yes,
realization, oh my goodness, her mum
it's
doesn't treat
nice.
her like that.
Yeah. And
With
no
me,
babies.
and you, as a child, you don't put it onto the adult. It's
No,
immediately what's wrong with me.
I
Um,
felt so bad. Hmm.
Yeah, and being the oldest child, can I tell you, from one oldest child to another eldest child, there's components of being the eldest child that play out in your life, and
Yes.
only other eldest childs can understand that. You are you are like the front runner of the family, the you know the often the one that is organizing the younger ones or protecting the younger ones or whatever it is. There's a certain amount of burden that comes with an elder child in a dysfunctional family that we never talk about.
And they don't talk about it. I would sometimes take my brother and sister and just take them on places on the farm. We lived on a big farm. And take them to play because I didn't want them near that.
Yeah.
And
yeah. What a beautiful thing, Karen. What a beautiful gift to your younger siblings. And we often don't talk about the beautifulness of the moments that you knew in that moment that your little brothers and your siblings you didn't want them. And as that you're still a child yourself, you had enough awareness to go, come with me, let's go out and do da 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 da.
Yes, and they were I don't know why it was so different from my mother. People need to be aware of this. They don't necessarily do everything the same to other siblings.
Correct.
So there wasn't, I didn't see any of that. So like, to example, mother would, she'd bring all these beautiful things home as gifts for the children, my siblings. And all of a sudden she brought me this little mouse rat, and it had like little diamonds. It was a pin, and she brought it home, and it was a mouse. And it was so scary looking. It had a rubber tail on it and everything. And she handed it to me with this look of hatred. And I took it, but I went underneath. So it was evening. So I raced to the kitchen, just to give people an example. I raced to the kitchen, and I'm only 10, probably 11, maybe 10 probably. And I hid underneath the table, and I was just crying because I got this ugly little mouse pin, and they got these beautiful trucks. And then my sister got this beautiful Barbie dolls and stuff like that. My brother came in, the kitchen was dark, and he crawled underneath the table, and he said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, "Nothing." And I just crying. And he went out. Of course, he ratted on me right away. He goes, Karen's underneath the table crying. I came out, and this is what the people really need. The audience really needs to wrap their heart around for a minute. I came out. Mother just stared at me like daring me to say anything. My father had his head down, couldn't say anything. And I went upstairs. Now, this is the part they need to hang on to. How devastating that this little mouse that was so incredibly scary looking. And I went upstairs, and I felt so alone and so broken and so like I was hated and nobody loved me. But at the same time, I took that mouse and put it in a sock so nobody would find it, and kept it and put it in the dresser because my mother gave it to me. So I was still trying to feel love for her at the same time I was getting ripped open. That's what the child's going through. So I lost you voice-wise. Oop.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. I just lost you for a minute.
Okay, let me just write the timing down on that because we need an edit. Okay. What I was going to say, Karen, is I'm curious about your dad. Obviously, from your description, he had no capacity to cope, and nor in that day and age would we anticipate that there's much ability to understand and cope. I'm curious then, did you talk to him? And also later in life, did you talk to him about the whole growing up situation?
Well, with Dad, and it was in the 60s, and when she started, so there was called it insane asylums. And so when my mother would get really bad, Dad would talk to doctors, and she would be gone. They would lock her in the insane asylum for 6 to 9 months. She was there probably my whole time of growing up until she committed suicide when I was 29. She probably had been in them 9 times. And and the sad thing about insane asylums, just to educate people, what my
Yeah.
father, that was the only place he could take her
Mm-hmm.
because people didn't know how to handle
They
people that
didn't.
were completely messed up in their mind. But in the insane asylums, you don't have the level, they didn't have it broken down by severity of the cases.
Uh-huh.
So mom would be thrown in
With
with
everyone?
that were, yeah, were people that were worse than her, not as bad as she was. So they were all together. But that's where she would go. And we would go and visit her. And my dad would drive us every weekend to go see her. So I'm going to give you a little bit about him. So every weekend, he loved her. But every Saturday, we would go down, drive 2 hours to the insane asylum, and we'd go in and see her. And one time she came out, she was all dressed funny. And I thought it was just so stupid. I thought, what is wrong with her? And we found out that she thought people were stealing from her inside. So there wasn't getting no help. So you realize nothing must be good happening there. She had all
Yeah.
the recipe cards shoved in her panties and her pants because she was just afraid that someone was stealing. So she wasn't still doing well, but she was scared of worse. She was getting scared of the people she was with. So I'm not so sure how to look at all that. But my father, to stay on that with you, he would drive us down. Nothing was said. We would see mother and he'd give her a hug and everything. And on the way back, he was such a sensitive man.
Yes.
He just
Yes.
couldn't do it. And I remember taking every Saturday. He never missed a Saturday. And then when she was gone, he never went to the bars. He never drank. He'd stay home. He'd work outside in the fields. He'd come in and he'd play games or watch TV with it. Never left us alone, but never once did we talk about it. In fact, when
Yeah.
my mother would go away for 6 or 9 months, it was like we didn't have a mother. We
Oh.
went, we went on. I started cleaning early.
Mhm.
But I got obsessed that if I kept cleaning and doing things
Yes.
for the house, she'd come home and be well. If I would improve the house, she would get better. I kept thinking it's still my fault. So all this time, I'm still struggling that it's my fault she's gone. I must be I must just be a terribly bad person.
Yeah.
So that my father, he would become a workaholic to pay all this, but we won't speak. So then, as you say, I get older, did I talk to him about it? We never did. He would,
Never, Karen.
he would talk to me when she would get really bad, he'd say, can you come help me with mom? So he
Oh.
knew I'd come back, even as adult married, not in the marriage. I'm married to my soulmate now, but not in the marriage I was in then. When
Mhm.
I was married, he'd say, can you please come help me with her? He leaned on me, even as a teenager. So we got to go back.
Yes,
I was
yes.
doing all the cooking, all the cleaning. I was
Yes.
helping with the siblings. I would babysit. I became the caretaker inside the house.
Yes.
He could
And when
function on the
you
outside.
do that at a young age, Karen, because that's my experience too, the cooking, the cleaning, the looking after, I didn't realize until like in my 40s that was not quite as it should be.
You're
You
not allowed
don't,
to be a child. You're never a child.
you're
You go from
never a
5 to
child.
never a child.
Yes.
So the oldest one, as we're saying this, I love it that you put it so beautifully. I never, Tony, ever felt like a child.
Mm.
Never once. I
You
don't even.
lose you lose that beautiful innocence and imagination and storytelling and daydreaming. From my own perspective, I remember a bit of that before I was 5 or 6, and then
Nothing.
it stopped, and I had to regain it and learn. As a process of writing my own story, you have to re-engage your storytelling ability and your imaginative ability to describe what you were going through. I'm so sad for your dad and for you, Karen, that you weren't able to talk about it. And no one in this day and age should suffer like you did or like your family did.
Yes, yes. And they think
Because
it's just so sad, Tony,
it
because
is.
what's still going on and people don't realize
Yes.
that it's still happening. It's not changed anything. It's just changed that we're in 2023. That's the only thing that's
The
different.
time.
Their home is still operating dysfunctionally, but it doesn't mean that there's not love there. There just is a missing love component, and
Yeah.
the children are fighting through it. But that oldest one, oh, just like we share
It's a
today,
burden, Karen.
it's
It's like a burden that I'm
to carry it.
recognizing that I need to shift. And like I'm in my late 50s now, and to recognize that I am no longer responsible for my younger siblings, for my mom, and for my dad has been just a huge thing for me to navigate.
Yes, it absolutely is true.
Release yourself from that burden.
Yes,
It's
and I did. I released it probably in my 50s.
yeah, see?
And it was just like, I think it's because I'd had enough.
Yeah.
I really think that I
Yes.
have gotten beaten to death
Yes.
mentally, physically
For
through my
so
whole
long,
life
it's like,
for so long that
not
one
going to do
day I
this.
just said, well, I had done a really terrible, I had walked over a line. People don't realize that we were the healthy ones,
Yeah.
but because of what happened to us, it
You
does
have
create a mental component that
correct. Yes.
is going crazy in our head. Doesn't mean we're ill, but it does leave us with the impact of how we're functioning in our lifestyle. And I hit bottom with my own brain, if you will. I married the third time to someone that I didn't even, it was the scariest person I ever been married to, and I can say that. And it lasted only weeks because I had it annulled. I realized I married absolutely someone that was mentally gone somewhere. I had really hit where I thought that I deserved nothing better than to be with someone that my mother was.
That's an important point for people to realize. Unless there's healing, you will search for the one thing that you know and understand.
Yes.
And exactly the same thing. The men that I chose, I was trying to replicate what I remember from my own dysfunctional family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
to heal from that, you won't make any different decisions. You won't have the capacity to make any different decisions. It's almost predetermined that that will be the path until you come to an awareness and do the healing and therapy and all the things that you need to do to heal that part before you make different
Yes.
decisions. And I wish that that healing could happen for children before they get to adulthood, so they didn't make those decisions based on the dysfunction that they've experienced.
Yes.
And that only comes with healing, doesn't it?
It only comes with healing, but if the children could get it, Tony,
Mm.
oh, they would thrive. Okay, it's just as simple. Everybody said, well, it can't be that simple. Yes, it is.
It
If
is.
you tell a child, don't touch that stove, it's hot. Do they listen to you? Yes. Put your coat on, it's cold outside. It's the same thing. That child is resilient. If
You
you can
are loved, you are valued, you are unique, you are important. Words around that, every child needs embedded into their brain. And I completely agree with Karen that if we circumvented the trauma in a child before they reached their teenage years, we would stop further abuse, domestic violence, gun violence, mental illness, alcoholism, etc., etc., etc. This is important. And retrospectively, both Karen and I are saying you need to reach the kids before they get to a certain point. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, you have to start early because they're struggling already. The only reason I don't go younger is because that gets into a whole new world of,
Yeah.
and not that they couldn't take it, but it would
Yeah.
take a lot of specialists. But I'm
Yeah.
saying if we don't have all that and you want to get to them as soon as you possibly can,
Mm.
fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth
Yeah.
grade. But I really
Absolutely.
think it's got to
I
happen before
agree.
they get into middle school and high school, because high school, they got too much drama going on. And by that time, you start to lose them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and, and they've gotten really good at hiding, and they become,
Yes.
and I mean this in all sense of the word, I even became someone I didn't like sometimes. And I was doing things that I know I didn't really want to do, but
Mm.
I wanted to do it so I could feel good.
Yeah.
I was even becoming the class clown. Look for
Yeah.
that one. The teachers
Yeah.
that I became kind of funny because I wanted attention. It's not
Mm.
about what they're doing, but
Look behind.
they got
Yeah.
attention for that moment. But that's not what I wanted to do. So I
Mm.
knew that it has to come earlier than that. It has to be because, and if you tell them, kids weren't educated. If
Mm.
someone would have sat me down and I had to take a class, let's say you had to take a class in sixth grade,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
go, I want to explain to you what schizophrenia is. And you're thinking, oh, what's it? All of a sudden that kid's going to think, oh, that's what's going on in my house. Oh my
Mm.
word, that's what's happening. Or you try to talk about, and everybody goes, oh, my friend has that. Another thing to look at
Mm.
is, I never let children. So children have actually reached out to me and said, how do I know? I said,
Yeah.
tell you what, does that friend ever let you come over to their house? They go, no, they don't. I
Mm.
said, there's another one. That's a clue. And I said, I'm
Mm.
not saying they're wanting a different parent.
Mm.
There's another thing that's teachable. They're not wanting another parent. They
They
love their
just
parent.
want the skills to
They just want the
navigate
skills
their
to navigate
life.
and learn and even go out for ice cream. I
Yeah.
said, if you know that's going on in your family, take that child to some normalcy for a moment. They just want to go to a movie. They just want
Mm.
they just want some love and attention and education.
Mm.
They want you to tell them what's going on in their house.
And Karen, there is education today. We have this amazing thing called Google,
Yes,
that will give you bucket loads of
yes,
information and assistance, and
yes,
and then there, schools often have school counselors,
yes.
but if a teacher takes that first step in recognition, okay, this child is behaving in a certain way, what sits behind that, what's going on?
Right. And if they could get in schools, I don't want to, I want to go wherever that you're wanting me to in the
Mm.
audience stay on this show, but the schools then make that program part of it. I know the teachers go, but I'm a math teacher and I so respect that. I'm an English teacher. I'm a literature teacher. I'm biology. Okay, let's get someone in there that's going to do that program then.
Mm.
So the child, I think it's mandatory. I think it should be mandatory that they
I
take it.
agree.
And
I agree.
I just do because I think that you'll miss the child. If you don't make them take it, then you're going to miss that child because they're good at it. They'll
Mm.
hide it.
Mm.
If their friend has it.
Mm.
Um, Another thing I've thought about a lot is the high school shootings. A
Yes.
lot of our high school kids that shoot.
Yes.
Okay, and when you look at them,
Trauma based. It's trauma based.
yeah, and they had mental stuff going on in their home and around them. I
Yep.
thought, okay, so let's say we got a hold of that child at sixth grade and they start feeling something.
Yes.
What if they
And they're
could,
supported in some
and
way.
they go, I'm just feeling a little different and I got this going on. If we could maybe start helping in every aspect of that children, boy, what a better world we'd live in. We wouldn't have
Absolutely.
the
I
problem.
am
Kids would come out of there and thrive and flourish.
correct.
And I always tell everybody, you worry so much about climate change. What are you going to save the climate from if we don't save the children first?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Won't
Absolutely.
be any,
Because those children have the answers, the
yes,
solutions to
they
those
do.
big problems. If you
And we're
start
just
with
missing them
children,
because they don't graduate. That's one thing I wanted to
yeah.
touch base with, Tony, is I didn't know what I want. When this is going on, you don't know who you want to be.
Mm.
You don't know that. My mother said, I'm not sending you to college because you're too stupid. So I never got to go to college like the other children, but I will tell you, them children are not knowing that they could be even the next best plumber. I'm not saying
Correct.
I don't need you to be the next big. I get so tired when people make it so high, like the president of the United States, who don't quit saying stuff like that. Like I always tell them, why don't you say the best plumber? If you want to be a cook, then have the best
The
cooking class.
happiest cook,
But just be happy and be
yes.
anything that you want to be. But what they need to know is these children are coming out of the schools when they have this in their home, and if we don't give them help, they do not know who they want to be, and they're settling. They're either homeless, they've come to foster care, or they're going to work at a job, and that's all they think they're supposed to do is go and make that money 8 to 5, come home, and they sit down and they're not even living their life.
Yeah.
Just not.
Yeah.
So
Karen, I'm wondering, did any of your teachers ask any questions along the way?
No.
Yeah.
No. I would love to say yes to that. I had many, and I have to say it, I had many beautiful teachers.
Oh, yeah.
I had one that just gave me a hug, and she had no idea what she did every day, but at the end of it, I was a kindergarten.
Yeah.
And she says, I can't believe I'm doing this. So in front of this auditorium, she goes, I'm giving the award to only one I had in my kindergarten class that never missed a day of school. And there was days I didn't feel good, but I was only 5, but I wanted to tell her, I wanted to say, the reason I come every day is because you hug me every day. Because I wasn't getting that hug at home.
Yeah.
So I would go in every day. I would have never missed out on her a day. So there's things like that. But I had beautiful teachers. And it's a small town.
Yeah.
People talk. You know that they were talking about it. You know that they were saying about it.
Yes.
Oh, they have, she's crazy. She talks funny. Like my mother would get so bad, she would drive on the opposite way of the road because that day she thought that her car should go opposite. So the sheriff would even have to come out and talk to my dad. It may be time for her to go away again because she's driving not correct in town and could cause an accident. So that's how bad they can get. But nobody said anything. And I still can promise you to this day.
And the doctors, Karen? None of the doctors.
I don't think unless none of the doctors said anything. In fact, all they do is load her up on medication. So my mother was taking, as I got older, I would see she was taking 15 different pills a day. Well, then as I got educated as an adult, I realized that there was a chemical warfare going on inside her mind. Each pill was counteracting what the other one was doing.
Yeah.
Basically what they want to do, Tony, I just have to say it the way it is. They wanted to make it like a zombie. They zombied her out so that she was in a
So they didn't have to deal with the problem. Instead of addressing the issue, working with her, because people can live with schizophrenia and be well managed and have very fruitful, amazing, wonderful lives, can't they?
Yes, they can. And so many of them are not getting treated that way still to this day. I'd like to say that they are, but how come we're still talking about it? Because there's still not, people have this wall up like if I was going to corporate office today and speaking, I'd say, do you hire schizophrenics? Do you really do that? Because I'm going to test it. And I'll bet you that if someone came in and said, I struggle with schizophrenia, but I'm on top of it, I wonder if they get that job.
Because it is one of when we talk about mental illness, and there are many mental illness diagnoses, but schizophrenia is one of the big ones because it is so very complex.
And it's complex for everyone. Not everyone's on the same path of it.
Correct.
Don't talk as, and I do want that out there in the public or the audience to know everyone with it is different because everyone's brain is different.
Correct.
Cannot be the same.
That's the component that people need to understand. Yes, they have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but for them, this is what their illness looks like. And that uniqueness of which makes it hard to manage, but it's not unmanageable, is it?
No, not. And I think they're gaining ground on
I
that.
agree. I agree.
And people, because we're talking about it, people are making it more aware, easy to talk about, say it out loud, say the word out loud. It's not bad to say I have anxiety, bipolar, I'm manic. There's a lot of terms. I would say that
schizophrenia, though, can encompass all of those terms in its disease process. So it is difficult.
I think people are scared of it yet. I think they're very scared of it. I was
going to ask you, in your experience, are people still scared of that?
They were very scared of my mother. Like we would walk into the grocery store and I would watch people push their carts away from her. They were at church, we'd sit down, not against, I'm not doing anything about a church. I'm just saying that's where we were that day. And I would watch women sit away from her. I do believe, unfortunately, there's people out there that still think it's catching. They think they're going to
It's not contagious.
It's not contagious. They think it's genetic. I do fight that a little bit because I don't believe that.
I was going to say that was the other thing that was popping up to make sure we get the audience to understand it is not genetic.
It is not. It's just like cancer doesn't know, it picks its own victims. Same with schizophrenia. It will pick them and it picked that mind, but it is not genetic. And so there's so much disillusion. There's still so much conflict.
Stigma and
there really is a lot of stigma out there. It's kind of like when how people relate to when they say cancer. Some people fear it. They're scared. They don't get aggressive with it. I did work with oncology for several years in my life, and I watched the same thing. I said, "You're so scared of it," and I said, "To heal it, let's first embrace it."
Yes,
you have to embrace it first and say, "I'm living with it." It's okay to say I'm living with it. Just like my mother, I wish we could have at that time said that for her, but we didn't get that done.
Karen, statistically, suicide and schizophrenia are very much linked, unfortunately, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But there's another thing people need to be aware of is most times when the schizophrenia does commit suicide, they're not in their crazy state of mind. My mother was
lucid.
Very lucid. She was just like you and me sitting here. She would have never, she left my father and I a note that proved it. And she wrote in the letter, I'll share that with the audience, that she knew at that time that there was no help for her, that she had her illness at the wrong time. Because when she come out of being in the crazy state and being right in the normal mind of her own, she would study mental illness. She would study.
So she could recognize.
And she said, I am not going to get the help there. I have it too early in time. There's no help for me. And I do not.
Gosh, that's a powerful statement, Karen.
It really was. And then she knew insurance wasn't ever covering. My dad was a very wealthy rancher farmer, but he had paid millions of dollars into this because it was not covered. She had electric shock treatments that weren't covered. They gave her 2 a day till she had 50. That was the first. When I was 4, when they took her in, that was the first thing they did to my mother.
I know, because that's the way that they thought that they had to treat it.
And all that did was take pieces of memory away. Correct. So the thing that I will tell people is that there's so much that needs to be done yet, and not over medicating, and just, mother was just, she would read about it. So in that note, she knew insurance wasn't covering it. So she wrote in there, I don't want them to take the farm. You've worked too hard. Yeah. And so she did it peacefully. She had studied how to do it, and 250,
Oh,
sleeping pills, and was gone in 5 minutes with a quart of milk. So she said she was going to do an act of love to us and come back next time.
oh,
Yeah.
wow, that's,
Well, people need to know when you friend someone that has this,
you got to watch out for them.
you gotta watch out and don't, just let them know that they're wanted and that
Mm.
they're loved, and that I think the change that I've loved a lot of mental health
Yes,
people are starting to talk about. Quit saying you have schiz, you're living with it.
you live
It's
with
not,
it, you
you live with
manage
it,
it.
you
Mm.
manage it, you have something, just like if someone has a cancer or diabetic, let's start putting it in the form so that that person doesn't feel like they're so much alienated from the world, that they don't have something that is so horrible that nobody
Mm.
wants to talk about.
Yeah. Karen, we're almost at the end of our time today. I've loved your openness to discuss this conversation, this topic so vulnerably. Um, what you do now is really important. So I want to make sure that the audience knows how to connect with you. If the audience is listening, Karen writes and speaks and talks to groups, and I want the audience to know how they can reach you. Are you happy to share that with us?
Oh, I'm so happy to share that. And it's very simple. I made it very simple because this day and age, you want it simple. I'm,
Correct.
being at 65, I said, both social media, I've got to make it simple. So
Mm.
you go to my website, which is naturally www.karencomba.com, and you'll find me.
Yeah.
And I was very honored that what pulls up first, so people know they're on the right website, is Wally
Yes.
Lamb endorsed me right away when I
Mm.
wrote the book. So
Yes.
his little speech is there. So right below it, you can see contact Karen. And when you click
Yes.
on it,
It is
it
easy.
goes right to my email, and you've got me. And I am a very good adamant about my email every day. And
Yes.
I do get you, I do answer. I can connect with you on speaking at that place as well.
Yeah.
And that way I can connect kind of, where do you need me? Because I do
Yes.
make it personal. I don't have this broken down. This
No.
is
And you talk to
how
lots of diverse groups,
I do. I
from
do high
kids
schools and
to
everything.
teenagers to
Yes.
teachers to
Yes.
corporate
So
to,
it's different. So it's different for me. I'll
mm,
say, we'll make it the deal on what the need is and who
yes.
I'm to
Yes.
and what situation they're needing. And I'd be happy to do that.
Karen, thank you so much for chatting
Welcome.
to me today. I'm very much looking forward to the second in our show series, which we will have coming up shortly. Please watch out for that. But I encourage you to connect with Karen. She has a wealth of knowledge and experience about coping, dealing, and having lived with schizophrenia. And she is not only that, a beautiful person with an innate understanding of what it's like. So if you're a child who happens to be listening to this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, that describes my parent, my auntie perfectly, please reach out to Karen. She will help guide and talk to you about what you can do to help manage your life around that diagnosis or the person who has that diagnosis. Karen Comba, thank you
Very
so
well.
much for
Thank you,
today. I'm
Tony.
looking forward
Thank
to
you.
our second show. We will have a wonderful conversation about the inception of the book, and we'll talk all things book in our next show. But stay tuned. We'll be back with Karen shortly. That's your lot for today. Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Tony.